The following podcast was recorded on Friday, June 25th, 2021, featuring Jim Bianco of Bianco Research and Ben Breitholtz of Arbor Data Science. To hear the podcast in real time, you can sign up for a free trial at biancoresearch.com or arborresearch.com or by emailing Gus Handler directly at gus.handler@arborresearch.com. You can also call Arbor Research and Trading at 1-800-606-1872. Thanks for your time and enjoy the podcast. Welcome everyone to Talking Data, our podcast series featuring Jim Bianco of Bianco Research and Ben Breitholtz of Arbor Data Science. I'm Kristen Radosh of Arbor Research and Trading, and today we're going to be talking about job search activity and unemployment benefits. On their website, Indeed came out with a chart indicating that states ending unemployment benefits this month have seen a decrease in job search activity. Looking at the broader search activity via Google searches paints the opposite picture. Why the discrepancy?
So let me start and let's go to the first table so everybody understands what we're talking about here. In the American Recovery Act that was passed in March, and that was the feature of that was the $1,400 stimulus check, was an additional $300 of unemployment insurance through September 30th. A lot of states then started to surmise that we were paying unemployed people too much. They weren't returning to work fast enough. So one by one, some states have been electing to end that federal supplement program. The table you're looking at shows you that on June 12th, 6 states they dropped the unemployment supplemental unemployment benefit. On June 19th, another 5 states dropped it, and this weekend, 10 more states will be dropping it. So starting Monday morning on the 28th of June, 21 states will no longer offer that unemployment insurance. And this will now give us the big laboratory test as to how transitory this lack of people wanting to go back to work will be.
Ben, your thoughts?
Yes, so we can kind of talk here now, since Jim kind of set this up perfectly, we can talk about the kind of discrepancy we're seeing with some of the data that Indeed just came out with. So what Indeed shows is that these states that on June 12th that cut the supplemental additional benefit, they saw a drop in search activity. Now, they had previously seen a jump in search activity through the middle of May, which may be attributed somewhat to the coming roll-off of those benefits. Yeah.
Ben, just to be clear, this is search activity on Indeed's website, right?
Yeah, good distinction. Yes, so this is specifically number of clicks on their website within those states, and then again, based on those dates. So it's gonna be very different from the search activity, and I'll explain why that we do from Google. But the search activity had, they see on their website has dropped within those states. Now, initially, it's seen a nice burst. But that's even kind of evidence too in those that are ended June 19th, and now maybe we'll see the same phenomenon with those ending this weekend over the next number of days. Now, getting to our data, what's kind of different is we see quite the opposite. So our search activity really on the kind of all states looking across the country looks pretty robust. And if you look at favorable versus unfavorable searches, we have a chart that shows in blue the favorable stuff. That's everything from entry-level jobs all the way out to queries about salaries and wages, versus the bad stuff, which would be like how many people are still telecommuting, self-employment, layoffs, unemployment benefits, and so on. And you'll see that everything that is good in the blue is rising and has been doing that really since kind of the tail end of April. So the market's kind of bounced back. We expect good numbers. Non-farm payrolls is supposed to come in somewhere just shy of 700,000 for June based on economist estimates. Going to the next chart though, what we're seeing in our data, this is again looking at a spread of favorable versus unfavorable search activity relating to the job market. And what we're seeing is this spread, which is on the previous chart, is actually accelerating for those states that ended their jobless, those unemployment benefits through June 12th and then June 17th and down to those this weekend. And you can kind of see nicely that the search activity has been improving. So this means that there's more searches for part-time, full-time jobs, and so on, versus those that have to do with getting laid off, searching for unemployment benefits, and the like. So there's kind of a big discrepancy. And if we go back to the next chart, what we can kind of see is, based on segmenting each of these state groups based on the dates that they end their unemployment benefits, there's some pretty distinctive differences. One in June, the June 12th crowd, we saw the biggest drop, which is not surprising, in unemployment benefits. And that kind of makes sense because they're kind of going away, so they're not going to be searching for them. But on the flip side, this gets to Jim's point about the labor force and how we use the office. They have the most heightened search activity for telecommuting and work from home. So you have those that are maybe getting called back to the workforce more than anybody else are saying, no, wait, we like this telecommuting, we like this work from home, and maybe I think we'll see the same kind of ripple effect occur down the line, next to the June 19th crowd, and then all the way out, indicating this work from home thing is legit. And there are people that are willing to forego employment, or at least to find alternative employment due to that potential luxury, or maybe kind of what's going to become the standard. But also, you can see with the June 12th search activity, and this is rolling 5-week changes in that, and the good stuff in blue, that's the strongest out of everybody within the June 12th states. And then it's followed by the June 19th, June 26th to the 27th, and so on. Now, the reason we think we have a discrepancy, and I could be wrong, this is just a hypothesis, on the next chart, what we show is the degree of part-time searches on Google. So you're looking for anything that has to do with entry-level jobs, hourly worker, part-time work, and so on. It could be at a Chipotle, it could be at McDonald's, could be anywhere. That is where we see the strongest search activity in these states that have ended employment benefits the soonest. And that might be emblematic of the leisure and hospitality crowd, those that were on unemployment insurance, that basically had to go that route during COVID because they were, laid off, unemployed, and so on. They may be coming back the fastest in these spaces. And that's kind of been evidence in this data. And maybe it's the case that indeed it isn't as representative of that crowd. I'm sure they are to a certain extent. I don't know for sure, but when I think of Indeed, I think of more full-time employment, offices, and so on. Not necessarily those going to work at Chipotle, but that could be. But I think that explains a big difference here, is that we're getting these states that ended the soonest to get the strongest search activity at the part-time level, not the full-time level, and that is still lagging, which is very interesting and gets right to the heart of what Jim and I have been talking about, which I'll turn over to Jim, which has to do with, are wages going to rise or not? And is this going to turn out to be true? Search activity stronger and people coming back to the labor force, does that mean that wages don't have to rise into the summer months? And transitory will eventually be correct and fade, or maybe it won't. I mean, we won't know until summer's end or going into the fall months, but let me turn to Jim.
Yeah, on one level, you would say, this is obvious. We're paying people to stay at home. You take away that incentive to stay at home, the extra $300 a week, and they'll go back to work. And I agree, that is obvious. But what we've also learned with the pandemic is nothing behaves as it should, because everything has been kind of turned on its head. So why wouldn't they go back to work? The Wall Street Journal had a story earlier this week, 2 days ago, and a survey was done recently, and 30% of people that work in offices said they never want to go back, and they would rather quit than go back to the office. And the JOLTS report, the job openings labor turnover report, shows that the percentage of people quitting jobs is at an all-time high. So yes, it's very obvious that maybe what we're going to see is these $300 rolls off and everybody goes back to the office. And that would make the argument that it is transitory, what we're seeing in terms of inflation, because there really isn't any wage inflation. But if they don't go back to the office, and again, so much of what's happened in the last 18 months has been so far out of what we expect, it wouldn't be surprising on that level. Why wouldn't they be going back? Because one of the lasting benefits or one of the lasting legacies of the pandemic is the office has changed forever. People don't want to waste their time commuting. They don't like the politics. They don't like the intermodal meetings. They just don't want to go back there as it is currently constructed. Now, if you reimagine the office, to pull a Disney term out, and find different reasons to go to the office for different purposes, that's a different story. But if the answer is going to be, let's all remember what 2019 was like, and let's all go back to this big building in the middle of a major city and pretend it's 2019 all over again, I think there is a quiet rebellion going on about that, and we'll find out. There are a ton of jobs available right now. We all know that everybody, the worker is in the driver's seat when it comes to finding jobs. The day we're recording, Southwest Airline has now bumped up their starting pay to $15 an hour and gave 7,000 employees a raise. And that they did because workers are in control. We'll find out, I think, in the next 3, 4, 5 weeks that whether or not people return to the office. If they do, and we see hiring come up, that is strong argument for that everything is transitory in terms of inflation, because wages will stay level or they will stay down. If they don't, why wouldn't they think about that? We're thinking about what the office is. The only way you're going to get them back is you're going to have to pay them to come back. And that is higher wages, more permanence to inflation. So the story in the bond market, we got a chart of the 10-year yield, is I've been arguing using this chart. We were 50 basis points a year ago. We went to 180, and we're now at around just above 150 on the 10-year, that the message from the market is indeterminate. If there is no inflation, we'd be down around 1%. If there is inflation, we'd be up around 2%. Meandering around 150 is the frustrating non-answer. The market hasn't made up its mind. It's still engaged in this debate about transitory. Maybe with those 10 states rolling off this weekend, added to the 11 states that have rolled off in the last 2 weeks, we'll get an answer to this: is inflation transitory with respect to what does it mean for wage inflation by August 1st? And that by that point, we should know, because like I said, it's not hard to get a job right now if you want one, especially for people that are on unemployment and it matters to them. Real easy to get a job in this environment. We'll know real fast whether or not they're going to return to the office or not return to the office. Now, my bet has been all year long that inflation has been more permanent than people think, and I'm biased towards rates going up. But that's of secondary importance. Of primary importance is I think we're going to get an answer a lot sooner rather than later.
And I'll say real quick too, I agree whether or not people return or not will be obviously a very big deal. And I was kind of the opinion, based on looking at the data, that we would see a massive return to the office and to the workplace over the past, really kind of coming into the summer here, into June. On a mobility standpoint, the U.S. is the most mobile out of all countries using Google mobility metrics, and that goes across all regions, from the droughts in the west to to some of the heat they're getting up in the northeast. So it's something that's strange that the retail mobility has risen so high now that we're well above pre-pandemic levels, but the return to the office remains so dastardly low. So I know, Jim, too, you like to look at the Castle numbers; those remain, low. And then you also have numerous other metrics like we look at with search activity, trying to measure the return to the office. We initially saw a nice bounce in the need for daycare, everyone from your grandma and grandpa to your dog, and for other things like business wear and so on. There was a nice burst of that in April and May, but for some reason, everyone kind of pumped the brakes, and this big return to the office just hasn't happened yet. Now, anecdotally, there's indications that a lot of companies are going to reopen once the summer's over and school starts in August and September. So maybe we will see some of that return, but I would still think we'd inch towards that number, not just remain kind of flatlined low. So sadly, some of that search activity has actually waned for business wear, for daycare, and even things like television watching and so on started to actually improve. All the people that are at home potentially, surfing the web or watching TV, that's actually somewhat rising. So it is confusing, it's muddied, it's a nasty kind of environment. Like Jim said, you can't really predict any of this, and that sadly means we have this horrible trading range established in the 10-year note and across interest rates, which makes it for bond investors just a goofy environment. So we'll have to see how this goes. Hopefully Jim's right. By August 1, we'll have some kind of answer that would be wonderful to help break us out of this range.
Yeah, that's kind of my hope too. Like I said, my bias is up, but more importantly, I just want an answer, and then once we get an answer, we can kind of adjust and go forward from there. And we'll find out real soon. So those states that have now dropped that unemployment extra $300 a week, they will now take center stage, and we'll see whether or not that has been the stumbling block to getting people back into the office. And if it isn't, then if you've started searching around going, why aren't they going back? I really think it's really on managers to say, why do we have this space called an office, and why do people need to be here? And maybe they can do it somewhere else, or what purpose do they do when they come here? Those are the kind of questions I think that will need to be answered if they don't return. Otherwise, the simplest way to get them back in the office is just pay them to come back to the office, pay them more money as well too.
Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you, Ben, for your thoughts today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As a reminder, Arbor Research and Trading is an institutional research and brokerage firm. Our two most prominent offerings are Bianco Research and Arbor Data Science. For any questions, please contact Gus Handler at gus.handler@arborresearch.com.